Welcome to Terra Stories Impact Investing Series. In this series, we explore impact-focused public and private companies in multiple market sectors that utilize proven, cost-effective, and game-changing sustainable technologies that reduce cost and increase efficiencies and shareholder value, obviously. I'm Tony Saxton, the founder of Terra, and I'd like to welcome private equity professional and Terra Impact Fund co-founder, Paul Savoldelli.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks for being on, Paul. Appreciate it, and look forward to having you as our new host after we get through this initial session.
Great.
So to kick it off, would you mind telling the audience a bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. I've been in private equity for the past 30 years, excuse me, and primarily in emerging markets. So we started in the United States, and then we have focused on Latin America. And we will discuss this as part of our strategy for the fund, because there's a perpetual capital shortage in Latin America. So in Latin America, we've executed more than $3 billion of transactions across a wide array of industries. And that includes cable television, media, logistics, and also some areas of sustainability. So the focus of the fund, as you know, is the entire Americas, because we believe that's an underserved and undercapitalized part of the world for sustainable investments.
Great, thank you. So how did you get involved initially in the environmental/impact investment space, and why are you, where's the passion coming from?
Like many of us, this has been a lifelong pursuit. So I'm a fifth generation Californian, and if you grew up in California, this is part of your life. Frankly, it's been part of my life. Perhaps I shouldn't generalize. But the whole issue of conservation, sustainability, all the little things you do like recycling and so on, is part of how you grew up in a state like California. As you know, the modern environmental movement started with the oil spill in Santa Barbara in 1968. So this has been part of my life, and it is part of my family's life for decades. This particular idea of investing in sustainability started, frankly, during my honeymoon. We visited Africa during our honeymoon 25 years ago. And we saw some very interesting sustainability models in the ecotourism area, where companies were conserving millions of acres of land and creating jobs and social projects that were very interesting. And this idea of investing in sustainable infrastructure and in ideas started with that because I wanted to bring the African model of ecotourism, a highly successful and sustainable and profitable model, to Latin America. So that's how this idea started, and it's evolved from there.
And you grew up partially in Mexico City as well, correct?
That's right. So I have spent a lot of time in Latin America. To some extent, it's my competitive advantage, the emerging markets. So after California, we lived in Mexico for 9 years, and I lived in places like Buenos Aires, and of course traveled extensively for the past 30 years. We've executed projects, and we'll talk about our execution capability and our discipline in a place like Latin America. But we've executed projects from Mexico to Argentina in 7 different countries.
Fantastic. So tell us about the Terra Impact Fund and how you see it impacting our planet.
The Terra Impact for me, this is the most important part of sustainability, which is to use market forces in sustainability. If market forces and industry and science created this problem that we're living, those same forces have to be used in sustainability to help the planet, because those are the only forces that can move fast enough and with sufficient scale to make a big impact. Governments have to put the guardrails, governments have to put the incentives and rules, but the market has to solve the problem. And many of the projects that we'll discuss in this conversation fit that bill. So, for example, people may want to legislate carbon neutrality till the cows come home. One of the projects in one of the transactions that we would be investing in would sequester more carbon than all the Teslas in the world put together. So those are the types of immediate impacts and scalable impacts that we think we can have by deploying capital in an intelligent way.
So that was actually my next question in terms of what are the investments that the Terra Impact Fund plans to make as funds come in, and how do you see it scaling? So would you mind elaborating a little bit on that example you just mentioned, or any others you feel appropriate?
Absolutely, because again, the idea is to bring the knowledge of venture capital and private equity to the sustainability world in our geography. And importantly, in our niche. Our niche is late stage venture capital and also middle market. There's lots of capital, very large funds chasing big solar deals and things of that sort. But this niche of late stage venture capital and also of mid-market has always been a niche, whether you're in private equity or in sustainability, that has had less capital chasing, because those deals are harder to find and they're more management intensive. On the other hand, I think they're more transformational. I think we can take businesses that have very good proprietary rights, very good management teams, and turn them into world-changing type of companies. So I will give you two examples which I'm pursuing with a tremendous amount of passion. One is a company called New Energy Blue. They're the owners of 29 global patents that were developed by the leading green energy utility, which is Ørsted in Denmark. And Ørsted decided to just focus on wind. So these assets became a orphan within their corporate structure. And this management team, which was very strong in the first phase, the first generation of ethanol facilities in the United States, was able to purchase these rights. And now the idea is to develop these facilities. So New Energy Blue is developing what are called second generation biomass refineries. And unlike the first generation, which turned food into energy, which never made any sense, so they take corn or wheat and they turn it into energy or ethanol. This takes the waste products from agriculture, so the straw, the corn stover, the waste products from agriculture, and turns that into ethanol, giving it a very, very low carbon score, because again, you're taking waste products and turning them into energy. And importantly, it's good for the environment. It's very good for local farming communities, because they're something that would have otherwise been burned off is being transformed into valuable products. So NEB has this process that takes agricultural waste and turns it into ethanol, which can be sold into all the different ethanol markets globally. Importantly, it's very valuable ethanol because, again, it has a very low carbon score. Secondly, they produce lignin, which is the cellulosic matter that's left over that can be thrown into a coal plant to substitute for coal or any thermal plant. And they also produce biogas. And again, one of these facilities sequesters 1 million tons of CO2 per year. Importantly, they are large projects. We have an extremely good management team that has built dozens of large projects. They're $220 million facilities. And just the waste biomass in the United States, the USDA estimates that you could build 500 of these facilities. We're not going to build 500 facilities, but the United States can build 50. And then 5 of the largest agricultural countries in the world, 5 of the 10 largest, are in Latin America and the United States. So the idea is to transfer this technology to Brazil, to Argentina, to Mexico, to other places. And again, these projects all have 25% IRRs. So they're very attractive investments. And the reason we can play in this niche is that this is in the pre-development stage. They need, let's say, $15 to $20 million to develop the pre-development of their first 5 projects, which are in Iowa and North Dakota, Illinois. So once they do that, then they're off to the races, because that's when the big money, the big infrastructure funds can come in and build the actual facilities. The investors that would invest with us would make venture capital-like returns if this project is successful, but it's a catalyst to change. And once you get past these pre-development expenses, then other groups can bring in billions of dollars to build the actual facilities. And again, there's a need for speed in sustainability, and there's a need for scale. It's very nice to do all the great things that everybody's doing, but you really need speed and scale. And this is a company that could develop 50 facilities with very good financial returns and a tremendous impact, positive impact on the environment. And by the way, on local communities as well. And that's just one example of the types of transactions that we're looking at, and they fit all the criteria of a great private equity or venture capital investment.
That's fantastic. Couldn't agree more. So in terms of sectors and geographic regions, you mentioned the Americas, sectors aside of the example that you went over. What do you think about in those regards?
Right. So the United States is an obvious place because it has both the great capital markets and the great rule of law structure to make investments of this type. Emerging markets are a little bit more risky, and therefore there are only certain types of investments that I would personally do in emerging markets. And those are primarily investments that have dollar denominated revenues. So when you're selling commodities, ethanol or whatever, into the global market, you're basically getting dollars back. So you take out the biggest risk of emerging market investment, which is devaluations. So your costs are in local currency, but you're selling into dollars. So again, it's a type of investment that as a private equity investor over the last 30 years, this is what you dream about. This is exactly what you want. Now, in terms of sectors in sustainability, we have several different sectors that we are focused on, but we will have a diversified portfolio. That's important both for investment reasons to have a diversified portfolio, but also because we want to be opportunistic with the best investments. So biofuels is an example of an area where we have tremendous deal flow. Ecotourism is an example where we have tremendous deal flow, and large scale ecotourism, especially in countries like Argentina and Brazil. Light electric vehicles, which you're most familiar with, is a great niche and someplace that I think could attract a lot of funding once you get past the initial development stages. So it's a diversified portfolio, both because of our deal flow and because that's the way we think we need to run an intelligent fund.
All makes great sense. So for investors, what type of returns are we looking at? I know you mentioned one deal's specific returns. And over what time frame will investors be looking at that come in now, for instance?
And that's very important. In that respect, I would say we're like a traditional private equity fund. So if you want to invest in something that will do good, you do not have to sacrifice returns. We are projecting IRRs in the 15 to 20% range, which would be very similar to any US private equity fund. And some investments, by their very nature, including New Energy Blue, may have IRRs that are substantially higher than that. On the other hand, some things like ecotourism would have more real estate type investment returns, and they would be more in the, let's say, 14% IRR. So we're focusing on a variety of projects, and they will have different timeframes when they come to fruition. So in general, we're looking at investing the fund over the first 3 years or so, and to harvest between 4 and 7 years. So in that particular question, we're very similar to any private equity fund. We just happen to have tremendous deal flow and opportunities in sustainability.
Great, thank you. Great answer. I've got one more question, but I'd like to encourage everyone to type any questions you all may have into the chat for Paul. So my last question is, Paul, do you have a favorite area that you're looking to invest in? I know you mentioned ecotourism. What is it about that segment, or whichever segment that appeals to you the most? And could you elaborate?
I would say my favorite investment, as some of you know, is in fact the biofuel sector, because it's large, scalable, immediate, and has the return parameters that we would all want. But my passion is certainly in ecotourism, because I've seen how that can transform communities and how it can transform cities. When we're looking at ecotourism, several companies now in Africa have developed a holistic model where they understand that the local communities have to benefit for there to be conservation in these countries. So we're talking Zambia and Zimbabwe and places that are difficult, Tanzania, difficult to have investments. But we have seen, and we've done a tremendous amount of research on this, and my partners in this endeavor built 50 ecotourism lodges in 7 countries. They helped develop the leader in this market space, which is called And Beyond. Some of you may have stayed at their lodges. And Beyond is now a miracle. It conserves almost 9 million acres of land. It has created thousands of rural jobs. It has participated in social entrepreneurship by creating dozens and dozens of local businesses. And then around the facility, around the lodge, you see tremendous social development, whether it be water projects, medical clinics, schools. So these folks have built dozens of schools, hundreds of medical clinics. So this is not a toy. This is not about having a luxury resort in the middle of nowhere that wealthy people can go visit. This is a holistic model, and it's the way I always approach these types of investments. We have a systemic problem. Something like global warming is a systemic problem. There are lots of inputs coming into that issue. So your responses have to be systemic too. This is not about putting a fence around a territory and saying you can't come in. That would never work in emerging markets. This is about developing that land in a sustainable fashion for the benefit of the communities and for the benefit of the investors. And I'll give you just one example how this works. When my partners started investigating India, when they went out of Africa and into India, they discovered things like the poacher who kills the tiger makes $25. So they destroy a very valuable resource to get $25. So those poachers get turned into guides. The wives work at the lodge. The grandparents are at the clinic. The kids are at the school. And what a surprise, the economic benefits of having a live tiger far outweigh the economic benefits of killing the tiger. So the model works. It uses economic incentives and intelligent investing to create very valuable assets, which make the whole community invest in conservation. And that's the way you protect natural resources in emerging markets, in my opinion. But it's a holistic approach and very intelligently designed.
And Paul, two follow-up questions to that. You had previously given examples of if a nonprofit, a World Bank or so on were to provide, say, $1 billion in funds, providing $1 billion in funds from the World Bank to be utilized for conservation versus getting $1 billion from the World Bank into our fund. How would you see that allocating, and why do you think it would scale that much more? And lastly, in this environment of COVID, investing in ecotourism, what do you say to that?
Yes. By the way, the issue of timing and investments is critical. So your question is spot on. You can think you're brilliant, but anybody who isn't been involved in private equity should be humble, because you may think you know everything, and you may do all the analysis, and you may think you have experience, and things like COVID occur regularly, not COVID specifically, but if you work in emerging markets, chaos theory applies all the time. So you are always getting buffeted by something you didn't expect. And that's where great management teams come in. So for example, right now we're consolidating the stem cell banking industry in Latin America, and we're one of the world's largest now. And COVID created opportunity for testing. So while our core business suffered a little bit, if you have a good management team, they move and they explore other alternatives, and the company is doing extremely well. So having great management teams is the proper answer to what you said. There will always be different challenges. Now, some challenges impact certain industries more than others. COVID has obviously been devastating to the travel and leisure business. Now, hopefully we will be better prepared next time COVID comes. So if you start developing projects now, they would be ready in 2023, when hopefully this is past. Now, is global luxury experiential travel a massive growth industry? The answer is yes. Will it have hiccups like what happened with 9/11 or with the financial crisis or with COVID? The answer is yes. But the asset is still very valuable. It still does a tremendous amount of good for the world, and it's scalable, repeatable, and has tremendous impact. So yes, and what you pointed out is part of managing any asset. These are, you will always have surprises, and you have to be humble.
No, thank you for that. And I would imagine the higher end luxury tourism world is not doing as badly as some other, the tourism.
That's right. That's right. One thing we like, of course, is being in more protected niches. And one reason we like NEB is that they have 29 global patents. So it'd be very hard to compete against them. And if you get the best sites, or if you're the first mover in some of these countries and get the best sites, it's hard to compete against you. And yes, in fact, the luxury experiential travel business is bouncing back faster than a commodity player in New York City, for example.
Perfect. And back to my last question. So if the world, hypothetically, a World Bank entity were to provide $1 billion to a World Wildlife Fund versus our fund, the Terra Impact Fund, how do you see the scale, the difference in scale between the two?
We would have so much more. We would have so much more of a multiplier effect with that funding. It's ridiculous. We would have 10 times the impact, and I say that with tremendous amount of respect for all of those conservation groups that have done great work for decades. And they've been leaders in the environmental movement and have done great work. But we have seen instances where people will invest $100 million into one of these funds, and they will conserve 1,000 acres of land, in Idaho or something of that sort. If you give us $100 million, we will conserve millions of acres of land, create thousands of jobs in rural communities, build some of the best hotels in the world. By the way, many of the hotels that my partners have built are among the best hotels in the world. They have like 20, and some of them are perpetual repeats. They have 20 hotels that have been listed among the best hotels in the world, including the one we developed in Kenya, which is called Angama. If anybody wants to see a live view of what we can do, you can go to Angama, ANGAMA.com, and you can see an example of what we would like to build in Latin America. And my partners and I developed that one property, but we'd like to repeat that in Latin America. And I must say, even in COVID, the clinic, for example, that we built has been very important. We are doing COVID tests in our clinic in the middle of the Masai Mara in Kenya. And by the way, the guests, since there are travel restrictions, can get tests before and after, same day tests in the middle of the Masai Mara, where we can't seem to do that in the United States. You can get testing before and after you travel. So these are the types of offshoots which are kind of interesting when you develop a sustainable asset.
It's fantastic. So we have 3 or 4 questions I see in the chat, Paul. I'll read one off. Could you please expand upon?
May I interrupt you just a second? I think if one of those groups were to invest in us, we would have a very immediate and rapid multiplier effect. We would be a catalyst for lots of different industries, and I think we could have tremendous impact and move faster, because there's an urgency to this, to sustainability. We have to move fast and we have to have great impact. Apology for the interruption.
No. Couldn't agree more, and great point. So Paul, as you'll see in the chat, a handful of questions. I'm happy to read them if you'd like.
Sure, why don't you go ahead, because I may not be as adept technologically, or you can read.
Sure.
Move forward.
One from Mr. James Carswell. Could you please expand upon mitigation for currency and political risk?
Super important question in emerging markets. That's part of what we bring to the table as a management team and as a fund operator, because we've been operating in emerging markets for 30 years and investing for more than 30 years. And we know how to handle political risk. And part of handling political risk is delivering something that's of benefit to the community. So when we were building cable systems and high-speed internet systems in Latin America, we would always get held up by some government who wanted payments that may not be proper and things of that sort. And we would tell them, we can't do that, but we will wire up every single school we pass and all government buildings with internet for free if you will let us build pursuant to the license we already have. So we are able to provide benefits, and we have seen that in action in places like Tanzania, where and Beyond built some very valuable lodges with protecting 70,000 acres, each one of them. And because of the corruption in Tanzania, certain Saudi princes wanted to buy that and use it as a hunting ground, because what a surprise, they were conserving these things very well. And these are kind of like Garden of Eden spots. There's tremendous amount of animals there. And so they just wanted to, in essence, expropriate the property and take it over and give it to a rich Saudi prince. And the local community protected us, because the local community had seen benefits and the local community had jobs. So they didn't want this. So the local, that's how we protect ourselves, by creating goodwill with the local community. So currency risk, we are going to be in industries that are mostly dollar-based. Ecotourism is a classic one. Your costs may be in pesos or bolivares or whatever, but your revenues are in euros or in dollars. primarily. So you get the best of both worlds, hard currencies coming in, soft currencies in your costs. So this issue of currency and political risk and mitigating those factors is front and center in any emerging market investment.
Thank you. Next question, are you utilizing the services offered by the Development Finance Corporation to reduce risk and stimulate improved opportunities for investment in great businesses?
We would like to. For years, we have tried to get various multilateral organizations involved with this. We have found them to be very slow and very really lacking vision. And perhaps we haven't communicated well, or perhaps we haven't presented what they need. But we would welcome that type of investment. I think we fit their mission perfectly, and whether it's the DFC or the IDB or whomever, and we've not had great luck attracting financing from them. We would welcome it. We think as I said, we fit their mission completely. And for example, when we propose things to some of these groups on ecotourism, it's too small, or the development risk, or the different excuses. They would rather build a Hilton in Managua than do something that can benefit the society and can benefit the environment. So we've not had great luck, and perhaps I will take that as a unfortunate failing, because we really should work with them.
That question was from Reamer Lane, who I believe has some good contacts there, so you may want to follow up on
yes,
that.
we're and by the way, some of those groups could invest in the fund, and as you know, we're investigating some of those groups. We would welcome them, and as I said, our missions are very much aligned.
Yeah. So next question from Thomas Love. I'm wondering about target investors. Do large fossil fuel companies have commitments toward conservation investments? Is there a way to bring these profitable investors to the table? And regarding my question, Tony's question, it seems that getting these private industry partnerships may be facilitated with public multilateral institutions like the World Bank, or are these not target investors? Obviously, we're just following up on Reamer there.
Yeah, no, and importantly, I think we will accept money for anybody who's aligned with our mission. And Steve Fitzgerald, who's one of my partners who unfortunately passed away, always thought that extractive industries, oil and gas, mining, and so on, might be very good partners because they have to invest in things that are more sustainable. So again, we are open to those types of investments. I wouldn't say our contacts are great in those types of investments, but some of the strategic partners that are looking at new energy blue are the big oil companies, because they know that they have to diversify and they have to get into sustainable fuels, for example, because that's where the market is. So some of these people might be attracted, some of these groups might be attracted to these types of investments. And we're exploring with some of them for that specific investment, and they would be welcome in the fund as well.
Thank you. So last question, how many active investments, so I guess there's one more after this, how many active investments are in the portfolio now, or in the pipeline that is, and what is the average investment size?
Okay.
From Adam
So,
White.
the fund is in its development stages, so we're seeking to raise $250 million. If we can raise more than that, we have great investments for more than $250 million. But we've tried to put together a team that harnesses venture capital, private equity, great back office expertise, so it's properly managed as a fiduciary. People like yourself who are very involved and have great deal flow in the sustainable industry. So I would say one of our main distinguishing characteristics is not only have we managed tremendous amounts of money as a fiduciary, but we also know how to execute projects and deliver strong returns. So the fund, we don't have an investment in the fund yet. We have investments that we've done on our own and through our other partnerships, as you have and I have in different areas, whether it's ecotourism or light electric vehicles or wind power, different areas. So that's one reason we have good deal flow, because we've been involved on the periphery of these industries for decades. And now it's time to focus on them to have a tremendous amount of impact.
Wonderful. So I believe last question from Andy McClellan. Do you have a development and management group in place to develop the ecotourism business globally?
The answer is yes. Now, developing it globally is for the big boys, and that's probably not us. Developing in Latin America, we could absolutely do. We would have, in each individual country, we have the right management resources and local partners. Sometimes they're the owners of specific sites that are not available to the public. And then we have the superstructure of people who formerly were with Ambion, were pioneers in this industry. So they were developing this Serengeti when that brand name didn't even exist. They would build things that, like the Ngorongoro Crater Lodge, which is one of the great hotels in the world. They built it when it took you 8 hours to drive there. But they got the best site, and being the first mover in this industry is very important. So we have a good management team, both as a superstructure and then on the local level, because we do understand we need strong local partners in each one of these countries. On the other hand, to his point, we would have to also build that out. So there's a lot of aspects to having a smoothly run system. So in our world, whether it's the destination management companies or others, we know who those people are, who are the top people who can help with the logistics of moving people around, not just putting heads in beds at a great lodge, but all the intricacies of how do you deliver a great product to a luxury market.
Sure. Fantastic. Well, Paul, thank you very much. Thank you all for the questions. I think we're going to sign off now. And moving forward, again, we're going to have Paul and Gary Brode speaking every Thursday, trading spots every Thursday on interviewing individuals from public and private companies that we're affiliated with and beyond that are making a significant impact in the world. And the series is hosted on www.terra, that's TERRA.b as in boy, Z as in zebra, / impact. And please invite your friends and anyone you think would be interested, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you all. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I greatly appreciate it.